Home is the ultimate lie. We are taught from birth that 4 walls and a deadbolt are enough to keep the world at bay. We buy into the illusion that once we turn that key, the rest of the world ceases to exist. But silence isn't empty, it's a vessel. And in the dark, that vessel fills with things we aren't meant to see. You think you know the layout of your hallway. You think you know every creak of your floorboards. But tonight, we are going to look at the moments when the house stops belonging to you. We are going to explore the terrifying reality of what happens when the lock doesn't fail, but the sanctuary does. If you're listening to this alone, go ahead and check the front door. I'll wait. Because by the time this is over, you'll realize that a locked door doesn't just keep people out, it keeps you in. The first time you are left home alone as a child, it feels like a coronation. You are the king of the castle. No parents to tell you when to sleep, no rules to follow. For one 12-year-old boy, that freedom felt like a grand prize. His parents were gone for the night, and his older brother, Zach, had snuck out to be with friends, leaving the boy with a house full of shadows and a promise of secrecy. To celebrate his independence, he did what many of us have done. He put on a horror movie. It's a rite of passage, testing your courage against flickering images on a screen. But as the movie progressed, the fictional scares began to bleed into reality. The house started to breathe. The hum of the refrigerator felt like a low growl. The wind against the window sounded like fingernails. Eventually, the pressure of the silence became too much, and he retreated to his bedroom, locking the door and burying his face in the glow of a video game. Hours passed in a digital haze until a physical sensation snapped him back to the real world. A heavy vibration traveled through the floorboards, the unmistakable thud of the front door closing downstairs. He felt a wave of relief. Zach was finally home. But as he lay there, waiting for the sound of his brother's footsteps on the stairs, the relief began to rot into dread. The sounds from downstairs weren't the sounds of someone coming home to sleep. They were the sounds of someone exploring. There were thumps, thuds, and the rhythmic pacing of someone who wasn't worried about being quiet. He crawled to the window and looked down at the driveway. It was empty. Zach's car wasn't there. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Someone had walked through the front door, and they were currently claiming the house as their own. Without a phone and paralyzed by a primal fear, he did the only thing a child can do to survive. He crawled into a small wall closet in his bedroom, pulling the door shut until he was encased in total darkness. He sat there, hidden behind his own clothes, trying to regulate his breathing so it wouldn't betray him. Then, he heard it. The bedroom door handle turned. The lock, which could be bypassed with something as simple as a fingernail, gave way. The intruder was in the room. He could hear the weight of the person shifting the floorboards. He could hear them dragging something heavy, perhaps his own belongings, across the carpet. He sat in that closet for 2 agonizing hours, a prisoner in his own bedroom, listening to a stranger dismantle his life piece by piece. When Zach finally returned at 4 in the morning to find the house ransacked, the boy emerged from the closet a different person. He had learned that the walls of a home are paper thin, and the things that walk through them don't always leave when the sun comes up. But sometimes the intruder isn't a stranger at all. Sometimes the monster is the person who has been invited into your life, the one who knows your name and has shared your table. In a small, quiet town where everyone knew their neighbors, a 5-year-old boy learned that familiarity is the most dangerous mask of all. His neighbor, David, was a fixture of the community. He helped fix trucks, he joined family barbecues, and he was trusted implicitly. One evening, while the boy was briefly left alone while his grandfather ran a quick errand, a knock came at the door. It was David. The boy remembered the rule, don't open the door for strangers. But David wasn't a stranger. He was the man from next door. When the boy opened that door, he didn't find the friendly neighbor he knew. He found a man whose eyes were glazed with a terrifying, drunken darkness. David didn't come to visit. He came to dominate. He grabbed the boy with a grip that left bruises and dragged him into the kitchen. There was no explanation, no logic, only the cold, sharp reality of a butcher knife pressed against the boy's stomach. The neighbor asked a question no child should ever hear, "Do you want to be stabbed?" He dragged the dull side of the blade across the child's throat, showing him exactly how easy it would be. The boy's life was reduced to the pressure of steel against skin. When his grandparents finally pulled into the driveway, the boy was seconds away from becoming a statistic. His grandfather, a man of the woods and a hunter of predators, didn't call the police. He saw the scene, and he reclaimed his home with a fury that was both ancient and absolute. David was cast out into the night, but the story didn't end with a police report. It ended with the grandfather leaving again that same night, his truck loaded with hunting gear, heading into the dark. David was never seen again. No one in town asked questions. In some places, the law of the home is the only law that matters, and some neighbors are buried deeper than secrets. As we grow older, we think we become better judges of character, but the modern world offers new ways for the darkness to creep in. In the spring of 2020, a 15-year-old boy found himself pressured into letting a mutual acquaintance named Neil stay the night. Neil was a boy who had been slipping through the cracks of reality for weeks, whispering about conspiracies and the Illuminati. But at 15, you want to be the person who helps. You want to believe that weird is harmless. The moment Neil crossed the threshold, the air in the house turned cold. His first words weren't a greeting. They were an interrogation. Are all the doors locked? He wasn't asking for safety. He was making sure there was no way out. The boy watched as Neil began to unravel in real time. He stood in the hallway, his face twisted into a grotesque, fixed grin that didn't move even when he spoke. He watched Neil's hand drift toward the knife drawer in the kitchen, a slow, deliberate movement that signaled an impending eruption of violence. The boy managed to use his wits, luring Neil out of the house under a false pretense and slamming the deadbolt home. It was only later that the full weight of the danger became clear. Neil had been carrying a manifesto, a written document of his descent into madness. He believed that he had to sacrifice someone to save himself. The boy had invited a predator into his home under the guise of friendship, and he spent the rest of the night clutching a kitchen knife of his own, watching the shadows for a face that used to be familiar. But there is one type of intrusion that defies all logic, one that suggests that some people don't want your money or your life, they simply want to watch you exist. This is the story of Brad. When Brad was 10 years old, he was shooting hoops in front of his house on a sunny afternoon. It was the picture of suburban innocence. But when he looked up at the second-story window, he saw a shadow that shouldn't have been there. Someone was standing back from the glass, watching him play. Thinking his family had returned early, Brad ran inside and called out, "Who's here?" A voice drifted down from the top of the stairs, a voice that was deep, gravelly, and entirely wrong. It said, "Brad, come upstairs." Brad didn't go up. He ran for his life. But when the police arrived and searched every closet, every crawlspace, and even the attic, they found absolutely nothing. His mother, frustrated and embarrassed, began to doubt him. She told him he was seeing things, that he was wasting everyone's time. Brad went to bed that night feeling isolated and crazy. But in the middle of the night, he woke up. The room was silent, but it wasn't empty. There, standing at the foot of his bed, was a tall, dark figure. It wasn't a ghost. It was a man in the flesh, standing perfectly still, watching him breathe. When Brad screamed, the man didn't attack, he bolted. He moved with a practiced speed, sliding the window open and dropping onto the awning below before vanishing into the tree line. The intruder hadn't just broken in, he had stayed through the entire police search. He had hidden in the marrow of the house, listening to them talk, learning Brad's name, and waiting for the moment the lights went out to return to his post. We tell ourselves these are isolated incidents. We tell ourselves that our homes are fortified. But the common thread in all these stories is the moment the victim realizes that the walls are just an idea. We live in a world where the person next door might be a monster, and the stranger in the window might be a permanent resident of your crawlspace. We spend our lives trying to be safe, but we forget that every door we lock to keep the world out also keeps us trapped with whatever managed to slip in before the bolt was turned. Tonight, as you lie in your bed, listen to the sounds of your house. Don't dismiss the creak in the hallway as the building's settling. Don't ignore the feeling of eyes on the back of your neck. The boy in the closet, the child in the kitchen, and Brad, they all thought they were alone, too. They all thought they were the masters of their domain. But the truth is, we are all just guests in spaces that can be claimed by anyone with enough patience to wait in the dark. And here is the final truth, the one that should keep you awake long after this video ends. In every one of these cases, the victim survived because they noticed the change in the air. They noticed the car missing from the driveway or the shadow in the glass. But what about the ones who didn't notice? What about the thousands of people who go to sleep every night never realizing that their safe home has been compromised? Think about that shadow you saw in the corner of your eye 10 minutes ago. Think about the door you thought you locked, but found ajar this morning. You tell yourself it's your memory failing you. You tell yourself you're just tired. But maybe, just maybe, you aren't the only one with a key to your life. The terrifying reality is that most of the time, the intruder doesn't want to be found. They want to live in the gaps. They want to watch you sleep, eat, and breathe. And as you sit there right now, scrolling through the comments or looking at your phone, ask yourself, if someone was standing directly behind you right now, would you even know? If this story chilled you to the bone, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of the brave. We dive deep into the shadows every week, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. Tell me in the comments, what is the most unexplainable thing that has ever happened to you while you were home alone? I read every single one of them. Stay vigilant, lock your windows, and remember, just because you can't see them doesn't mean they aren't there. Good night, and try to get some sleep, if you can.